ethics and what we're supposed to be doing as we're living the Christian life in the world. So there's the Ten Commandments in the Old Testament and the Sermon on the Mount we'll be looking at later on, which is of course in the New Testament, Matthew 5 and 6. Give it a read, of course. A particularly good part. It's a really great summation of the ethical teachings that Jesus had and that he taught us. Jesus takes the Old Testament rules and actually goes further, goes deeper, goes even more actually, really. He came not to destroy the law, he came to fulfill the law. And we'll talk more about fulfilling later on. Jesus is able to summarize the law into two key points. The first commandment is, well, I've tried to summarize it like this. So love God and love your neighbor. And between these two things are the law and the prophets, Jesus tells us. He spoke to people who had followed God for centuries. They had learnt from the Old Testament rules, and so were able to continue that climb towards God. And so that's where the New Testament comes in. It's kind of odd we think of the Old Testament as being really harsh and the New Testament as like fluffy. As far as the ethics go, it kind of becomes stricter in the New Testament. We'll be talking about the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus tells us to go above and beyond. So, this is our Magna Carta, our book of law, I guess, for Christian ethics, where the Old Testament sets, I guess, a minimum standard. It says, don't cheat, don't covet, don't lie, don't kill. The Sermon on the Mount goes much, much further than that. We'll kick off with the beatitudes, which are kind of like the Ten Commandments. The Sermon on the Mount, kind of the new version of the law. The life of Christ and the saints talks a lot more about how a Christian should act, analogous to how a Jew should act, for the Old Testament. Different saints, of course, will affect us differently because different saints were able to manifest Christ's love in different ways. Some were martyred soldiers, as we've already discussed. Some were princes and princesses. Some were killed for converting, and the examples just keep going on and on. So that's I guess one reason why we've got the saints in such high regard. The governance of the synagogue, our equivalent would probably be in Acts, which is the book of the Bible of the Gospels. By the way. So the Beatitudes. In our parish, we sing this every liturgy, and it's a great reminder for every liturgy. This is sung just before the small entrance. In thy kingdom, remember us, O Lord, when thou comest into thy kingdom. Then a whole list of blessed is such and such. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, and so on. Looking at this, blessed are the meek, the poor, the persecuted, the hungry and thirsty. These aren't exactly the winners in society. Aren't the millionaires and such. Ultimately, Jesus teaches us to think differently. Wrong button. So it's only through mutual love and respect that we see others as unique, as having something to contribute. If we're thinking, I'm stronger, therefore I'm going to get my way, that's going to fail. Because ultimately there will always be someone bigger, faster, stronger than you. With love and respect, we can see others as unique. And as people, as children of God, as icons of Christ, however tarnished they may be. And through this, we create a whole that is much greater than the sum of its parts. And we can create this together with God, who is greater. Any questions so far? Yeah. Yes.
The poor, the hungry, the thirsty, and all that. I thought that was all about because, sometimes we're not granted those things here in this life because we have it provided in, our life with God.
Yeah.
Whereas other people that aren't going to be with God because of the choices they make and stuff are granted lots of stuff here because it's kind of like, well,
It's not that straightforward.
consolation.
So,
I don't know, I didn't know how to
no, I see where you're coming from. And to some extent, that's probably true. God, shows people riches now when even if they're not living a godly life. Not always, but sometimes it will happen. In order to say, look, you think this is good, but you ain't seen nothing yet in heaven.
Because the more he tests us here is because he knows that we're, stronger in our soul to make it, and to be closer to him.
It'd help.
Like,
of course, pretty well everyone in Australia, like at least everyone on the dole, and that's like $200 a week, are in like the top 10-20% of the world in terms of income.
well, yeah, no,
So
I know
as far
what
as-
the comparatives to,
If you're on unemployment benefits in Australia, which is about 400 a week, and I think a little more, 200, then you're in the top, at least the top 20%. We're not really the poor. We can afford to be here tonight. We're not the poor.
yeah, true that.
There is some element of truth to that, but it's not a complete overlap. There are rich Christians now, and there were rich Christians back in even in Acts. But in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus continues and says, "You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world," which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. At least it didn't when I read it the first time. He's speaking in a parable where the light of the world talks about being exceptional in a world of darkness. We should not hide our light. It's very important for us in terms of what our parish is designed for. We should not only not hide our light, but to show it to the world. Salt, at the time of writing, was seasoning, was preservative, was necessary for human life. So salt would preserve food. A very important function of it. It seasons food, which we still use it for now, and necessary for human life. Just in the same way that Christians are necessary for life in the world, the followers of Christ make the world, I guess, a more palatable place to be. It's a kind of friendlier place to be. We take care of those who can't take care of themselves, and that's always been part of the church. Always. Even when we were a minority in an empire that persecuted us, we cared for people that couldn't care for themselves. Christ says that he doesn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law. The original law was God-given. Jesus, as being God, isn't going to radically change that. The original law was from God. The law was designed to benefit physically, mentally, spiritually, even hygienically. The point was lost along the way, and the point was communion with God, which is the point of our ethics. When we meet someone, when we make a new friend, we don't open a checklist of things that we need to do. Have coffee, go out to a movie. We'll have dinner afterwards. It'll be great.
Really? You don't do that?
It could help
Sorry.
sometimes. Spreadsheet.
Again, life doesn't work like that. It's about the things that we do as an expression of love and friendship. When we meet someone, we express ourselves. When we talk about fulfilling and completing, that comes back to a word that in the original plerosomen is the way that we say it in the liturgy. We say, "Let us complete our prayer to the Lord," and we know that we've got half an hour to go. Every new convert struggles with that. All right, we're about finished. Oh wait, no. So, Haha, you've still got half an hour standing. Clearly it doesn't mean end. It means fulfill, or to bring it to its proper completion. To be whole, I guess. So Jesus brought the law to its completion, to its fulfillment, to its maximum. It's about a relationship, which is what we need, being real people and interacting with the living God. Jesus talks about anger being essentially murder, and this cuts back to how he teaches to exceed the law. He's not just being naive. Anger causes us problems. It causes issues with our lives, with our thoughts, if we don't learn to let it go. It can lead to solitude and wanting to be away from everyone, or it can damage other people over time. And even the anger, even if we don't express it, that's a lack of communion with other people and a lack of communion with God, therefore. And lust does basically the same thing with the +1 of treating other people as objects without treating them as people. And in doing that, you can be surrounded by thousands of people, but totally alone. So, the focus isn't on actions anymore, not in the New Testament. It's about our thoughts. How our intentions lead to our thoughts and our actions. So that's a little confronting. I don't know anyone here that's done it. It doesn't mean mutilation, thankfully. And for what it's worth, mutilation was condemned around the Fifth Ecumenical Council, just by the by. God created this body. We don't mutilate the temple of the Holy Spirit. We don't do damage to our bodies. That's important. Our eyes refer to our love, the apple of our eye. Whereas our right hand man, the guy that we trust with everything, our offsider. Sometimes the people that we've chosen around us, the people that are closest to us, don't lead us to salvation. Sometimes that's the case, and if that happens, that's really difficult. But ultimately, salvation is the goal. It isn't the people around us, it's salvation. And that comes back to what our priorities are. If it's salvation, then maybe the people around us need to reflect that.
You can go vice versa as well. You might not be leading someone to salvation. That's the best thing. You've got to check yourself.
Well, that's easy. You can change yourself.
Yeah.
Try changing other people. It doesn't work. So don't swear, which is referring to don't take oaths, don't make promises. If you promise to do something, obviously you should do it. But why insist on I promise? I remember many years ago, back when I was in high school, do you promise? Well, wasn't the fact that I said that I was going to do it enough? Going further than that, you shouldn't even need a promise according to what Jesus is saying. And should be avoiding wasted words as well. So I promise should be a waste of time to say. It should be good enough that you can say, I will do this. I will be here for this talk. I can't think of an example off the bat. I will make dinner. That's a promise enough. You don't need to say, I promise to. Don't resist evil people. Well, that's really difficult. But that's the standard that Jesus is setting. Don't resist evil people. Give to whoever asks. Including the homeless guy on the street. Give to whoever asks. Love your enemies. Pray for those who curse you. That's a really high standard.
So what do you tell about homeless people? What do you
Give money to homeless
Give
people.
to
Caesar said there's a tax collector or something, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the tax collector said, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because they all hated back in those days.
No, he didn't do it because they all hated him. He realized he did something wrong. Because what used to happen, we think the tax department's bad. What used to happen, they'd get, in Judea, they'd get ethnic Jews to be the tax collectors. And whatever they took, there was more than what Rome wanted. That was their pay. So they could be extortionists.
Yes, Matthew was a tax collector and he was deemed worthy to become one of the 12.
Yeah.
So I must have been doing.
He must have repented, and then you convert. Baptism does good things.
Yes.
Takes away everything.
Ultimately, they gave up everything in life just to follow Jesus. So
You've got to remember, these are really high standards. That's not to excuse us, but to recognise the plainly obvious that these are high standards for us to aspire to, and hopefully to meet those. You've got to remember, these high standards brought down the Roman Empire. Thousands of Christians martyred, the persecutions and all, everything that came along with that. Finally, after about 3 centuries, the Roman Empire itself, the number one power of its day, became Christian. So these things do have power. We can see in pacifist movements, more recently in India, the pacifist movement has a lot more power than you would expect from people who are trying to fight back with whatever stones they happen to have. There's a lot more power there. You cannot serve God and mammon, it says in a number of translations, God and money. So we ask ourselves sometimes, and there's a fast this month, why fast? Why give up meat and dairy products and even oil and wine? It tames our aggression. It allows us to exercise control over ourselves at a very basic level, because everyone needs food. Controlling that basic need that we have, that's a very powerful thing. It means that we're able to control ourselves and that we can use that control in different parts of our lives. Our possessions will ultimately somehow be destroyed. They'll get old, they'll decay, they'll break, they'll get stolen, whatever. Ultimately, we won't have them. And even if we don't lose them, at some point, death is inevitable. And if you die with the most toys, you aren't just dead and therefore unable to use those toys, but you have to give an account of the gifts that God gave you. As we said before, we're all here, so we've all got plenty of gifts from God. Plenty.
I listened about fast another opinion, because it was maybe 2,000 years ago, meat was very expensive. And the fruit, vegetables was very cheap.
Yeah.
And when Christian fasting, someone saying, tell you take difference, when you don't buy meat, you save money and give this money for poor people. So it's fasting to save some money for poor people. But now all changed. Now is some fast production is very expensive and meat very cheap. And so it's for this purpose.
It's mostly about self-control. It came out of monasticism. So they were trying to control their temptations, their passions. And not eating meat is a big part of that. How in depth we go in that, like if the 50th product of a particular dish includes milk solids, the key for fasting is to control what we have. Different spiritual fathers will may be able to apply fasting rules for different people. From all of the rules that I've seen on fasting, pregnant women are exempt because, well, the child needs food and needs particular nutrients at particular points in its life cycle. That's the physical reason, but every rules that I've seen have an exemption for pregnant women. For travellers, those who are travelling, for the sick, and for children up to 7. When you have a relationship with a particular priest, they'll be able to apply the rules for your situation. So that's always been the rule that I've followed. What that particular priest has told me to do, I've tried to do it as best I can. So I'd certainly recommend that to anyone.
Also, hospitality. if somebody, a non-Orthodox person, or even, maybe even an Orthodox person, gives you something as, you know, hospitality, that's a place.
Yes, that's another one.
Don't
If
throw
you're
it in your
offered
face.
food, then you accept the food. You know, fasting isn't something that you throw at other people. But, you know, it's
Prideful.
exactly. It defeats the purpose. Yeah. If you're fasting and eating other people with your words, you're not doing anyone.
Yeah.
And St. John Chrysostom in particular says don't do that. Basically Holy Week in a lot of places can be one of those times because that's right at the end.
So why does it turn aggression? I find that during Lent everyone's a lot more aggressive. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, there's just so much aggression and I just go...
Well, yeah,
That's
then
why I'm not involved in Lent.
you know those memes where it's got you're doing it wrong? Fasting.
It's not all about food, that's what it is.
No, that's the
Don't
point.
eat each
That's
other,
the point. It's fasting is a way of controlling yourself. So if you're not eating meat, but you're just accessing in another way, you're not really fasting. That's not a fast. That's just a different kind of meat eating. You're just eating other people.
And it also helps us because that way when the devil throws challenges at us, we've got a choice, a sinful one and a godly one. Well, the whole reason about fasting, I thought, was to help us strong and resist the devil's choice to choose, one that's better for ourselves.
Because in our daily life we're experiencing don't eat that, eat that instead.
Because I listen in gospel, Christ fasting to be temptation, to receive temptation from the devil. But I think we have a lot of temptation without fasting. If we become fasting, it's too much.
Well, if we didn't have that, then we'd probably have less temptations because we wouldn't need to be tempted. How much worse would we be if we didn't exercise our self-control like that?
He also told one of the disciples that they couldn't get out one of the demons inside a person because it could only be eradicated through fast and prayer. So obviously, there's a
Great spiritual benefit. We have our own struggles with the evil one, with our own difficulties. So that periodic fasting and feasting that we've got, and we're very sure to go fast, feast. It's very balanced fast, feast.
It's last 200 days every year, yes? So
Including
one
Wednesdays
day,
and Fridays and all the
one
like.
30% repentant and 60% it's a fast.
There's a beauty of it. It means that we don't just be vegetarians, but we've got to consciously choose and exercising that choice. Well, it can get tiring, which is why we get a little more titchy during the end of fasts, a little more on edge. It can be that we've got a certain amount of self-control, but the goal is to increase that. And I'm just speaking psychologically. We've got to be able to increase our element of our amount of self-control, I guess. It's like a muscle, we've got to work it out. So, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things, all these material needs will be added to you. It's another part of what Jesus says. He's talking about how we fret over material things and worry about our income and do we have enough money to do this, that, and the other thing. Ultimately, Jesus tells us to ignore all of that. We've got to seek the kingdom first. And all this stuff on earth, it'll sort itself out. That's not easy in a world with, well, let's start with the simple dishwashers, washing machines, fridges, and then you continue on to your iPads and computers and video recorders. Ultimately, the richer that we are, the more that we go, well, we don't have that. We don't have new curtains. We don't have artwork on the walls, whatever the case may be. When you don't have much, you're able to survive with not a lot. So you know that you can be okay with not much. If we look at nature, we don't see worry, we don't see trouble, we see living life. A bird will have this food for today, and this food for its child perhaps. Anything more than that, that's tomorrow's problem. There's living life. Well, that does sound like it's anti-plans, and that our material things should only be for the day at hand in this particular 24 hours. It does say in Scripture that plans are fine, and to make them, but they have to be subject to God's will. And I'll talk about a 5-year plan and a 3-year plan just as well as anyone. But these plans are, at best, goals, guides along the way. They always have to be subject to God's will, to changes that happen. Maybe we won't get it, maybe we'll exceed it. We don't.
God gives us gifts, and He wants us to use them, to provide more from it, from the gifts that He's given us.
And if we remember that they were gifts, so they're unexpected things that we get at random times, then we probably be more better off, really, if we remember that about God's gifts. Yes.
You're going to be said that material things themselves aren't bad or evil or whatever, but being obsessed with them or idolizing, creating idols out of material things, that's a sin. That's bad.
Yep.
So don't do that. But having stuff is fine. Yeah, we
having
need
them
stuff
on its own isn't a problem. It's what you do with it.
Yeah.
If we're over consuming for the sake of it, that's an issue.
Yeah.
That works if your footprint, I guess, is too big, and that's a problem that most people in the Western world have. We consume much more than the world on average.
And then the more we have,
The more we want.